What's up everyone, Darcblade here with another Hunter's Guide to Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. In this video, I'm going to be bringing you another endgame build, this time for the Greatsword. Now as always, what are endgame builds? Well, they're builds that are constructed from some of the rarest armor, weaponry and decorations in the game. They also have talismans and Krios crafting, but the Krios crafting isn't to the extent where every piece of armor is featuring rare augmentations. Now, if you find these videos helpful, informative or even entertaining, please consider leaving a like on the video as well as subscribing to the channel, as I try to bring you a variety of builds for a different variety of playstyles. Now when it comes to the Greatsword, it's the heavy hitting weapon of the Hunter's arsenal, able to dish out large damage numbers, but as a result it's quite slow. However, with Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, with the introduction of the Surge Slash, it can now start to make use of elemental and element builds. And so with that, I present to you the Elemental Greatsword build. This build is about utilising the Surge Slash to perform faster attacks with the Greatsword so we can make use of elements. Of course you have to counter the monster with the correct element, so you need to be aware of that. Anyway, when it comes to your armor, you'll need the full Chaotic or Nephilim set, depending if you're male or female. Chaotic for male, Nephilim for female. There's no difference in stats, it's just appearance. So, you'll need the Chaotic Helm, Chaotic Mail, Chaotic Vambraces, Chaotic Fouls and the Chaotic Greaves. For your Petalace, go with either the Demon Petalace or Absolute Petalace. Demon Petalace for extra damage, Absolute Petalace for something more balanced. Then as for your Talisman, go for a Talisman with as much attack boost on it as possible. An extra decoration slot is also desirable. I have an attack boost level 3 on my Talisman as well as a point in Critical Eye and a tier 3 decoration slot. As for my weapon, now this is an interchangeable elemental greatsword build, so you can use any greatsword that has a decent elemental rating. I would also recommend not worrying too much about going for purple sharpness, just go with ones that have a huge chunk of white sharpness. For the demonstration of this video, I'll be showing off a ice build, and so we are using the Flicker Blizzard Blade, which is the Aurora Somnicanth Greatsword. If you wanted to use different elements, I'd recommend the Royal Ludroth Greatsword for water, the Valstrax Greatsword for dragon, the Kezu Greatsword for thunder, and the Fire Tree Greatsword for fire. Whilst these weapons may not have the highest elemental rating or the highest raw attack, they have enough white sharpness and decoration slots that you should be able to build something similar to what is shown in this video, but using different elements. As for the Krios crafting, you want to go with a Rampage slot upgrade, and then either attack increase or elemental increase. As for the Rampage decoration and skill, go with either Elemental Bane if you're going up against monsters who have high weaknesses to elements. Failing that, you can go with the Daora Soul, which will increase our affinity as we continuously land hits on a monster. Failing that, you can also go with one of the anti-species decorations. And speaking of decorations, some of these may be different depending on what weapon you're using, but for the most part, I've gone for a Chain Jaw for a point in the Burst skill, Frost Jaws to max out the Frost attack skill. Remember, if you're using a different weapon with a different element, you'd replace those Frost Jaws to match whatever new element you were using. Then gone for Charger Jaws to max out Focus, Bloodening Jaw to max out the Bloodright skill, a Spirit Bird Core Jaw for a point in the Spirit Bird Core skill, Attack Jaws to max out Attack Boost, a Hard Steadfast Jaw to max out Stun Resistance, Critical Jaws to max out Crit Boost, and then finally a Jumping Jaw for a point in Evade Extender. This one is kind of optional though. So if you've done what I've done here, you'll have a build with a fluctuating raw attack. At its base it can be 423, but it can go above this or slightly below this. You also have an ice rating of 152, again this can go slightly higher or slightly lower, with a huge chunk of white sharpness. You'll also have 50% base affinity, which again can increase even further, up to even 85% when you take into account all the various buffs found on this build. You'll also have a decent defense of 763 that is strong against water and ice, but unfortunately weak to the other elements. Now, when it comes to the switch skills, as this is an elemental build, I strongly recommend using the Surge Slash combo. This allows for a series of quicker attacks that allow us to apply more elemental damage to a monster. I also couple this with the Adamant Charge Slash instead of the Strong Arm stance, so we can move about the place quicker, and I'm also using the Rage Slash, but these last two are kind of optional in all honesty. I will say one of the reasons we've taken the Steadfast Jaw and the Stun Resistance is because of the Adamant Charge Slash and the Rage Slash, as sometimes when we're powering through a monster's attack, we can still get stunned. Stun Resistance negates this. And speaking of skills, first of all we'll have Critical Eye at level 7, increasing the base affinity of this build. You'll then have Resentment at level 5. Resentment is a skill that whenever we have red health on our health bar, which should be the majority of the time with this build, we'll gain increased raw attack. You'll then have Ice Attack at level 3, increasing the ice rating and thus the ice damage of this build. Remember, if you're using a weapon with a different element, you'll replace Ice Attack to match whatever new element you were using. So say you were using a fire weapon, it would be Fire Attack at level 5. Next up is Attack Boost at level 4. Attack Boost is a skill that increases the raw attack of a build, and at level 4 or above grants us a percentage bonus to our raw attack as well. Even though we are using an elemental build, raw attack should not be ignored when it comes to the greatsword. You'll then have Critical Boost at level 3, increasing the damage of our critical hits, but only applies to the raw portion of an attack, not the elemental portion. You'll then have Focus at level 3. Now this skill is normally essential on greatsword builds, but with Surge Slash you don't really need it that often, but we are still using the Rage Slash occasionally, so this is why I've taken it. Basically it allows us to charge up our charged attacks more quickly. You'll then have Stun Resistance at level 3, negating all stun effects on our hunter. We talked about this when we were talking about the switch skills. You'll then have Bloodbright at level 3. Bloodbright is a useful defensive skill, as when you're attacking a monster body part that has been broken, you'll regain health in proportion to the damage you dealt to a monster. This can help keep us alive. You'll then have Coalescence at level 3. Coalescence is a skill that whenever we remove a ailment or blight from our hunter, we'll gain increased raw attack, elemental attack and status build-up. Coalescence works in unison with the Bloodlust skill, so with this build, Coalescence will activate when we've removed Bloodlust. And speaking of Bloodlust, next up is Bloodlust at level 3. Bloodlust is a skill that causes our hunter to suffer with a modified version of the Frenzy virus. If you want more information on the Frenzy virus, there is a video dedicated to it elsewhere on the channel. Basically, it gives us a purple bar above our health bar that gradually fills up, and during this time we'll gain increased attack, evasion capabilities and reduced stamina recovery. But it drains our health. However, should we continuously attack a monster, once enough damage is dealt, we will be healed for the health that the Bloodlust drained, and on top of that we'll gain increased base affinity. Next up is Strife at level 3. Strife is a skill that increases our elemental attack and affinity in proportion to the length of red health on our health bar. So the more red health on our health bar, the more of a bonus we'll get to our elemental attack and affinity. On top of that, at level 3, we also get infinite stamina when our health bar is at about 60% red health or higher. Anyway, next up is Berserk at level 2. Berserk is a skill that, when we're using the blue switch skill scroll, all our vitality will turn red and start decreasing over time. But during this phase, as long as we have red health, we cannot faint. However, should we take damage whilst Berserk is active, how quickly the health drains is increased. So as you can see, Berserk works well in unison with Strife to enhance our damage and give us a unique way of surviving hunts. Of course, if you want more information on these two skills, there is a video dedicated to both of them elsewhere on the channel, so check it out. Anyway, next up is Evade Extender at level 1, slightly increasing the distance at which we dodge and evade. You'll then have Spirit Bird Call at level 1, which causes random spirit birds to come to our hunter at fixed intervals, reducing the need for our hunter to go out of the way to collect them. You'll then have Blade Scale Hone at level 1, which is a byproduct of the Krios crafting. It's not needed on this build really, but when we dodge and evade an attack with our weapon drawn, it will recover a tiny bit of sharpness. You'll then have Elemental Exploit at level 1, which is a skill that increases elemental damage when attacking a body part that is extremely weak to elements. And then finally you'll have Burst at level 1, formerly known as Chain Crit. Disclaimer, you may not have this on some versions of this build depending on what weapon you're using. Basically, continuously landing hits on a monster will gradually increase the raw attack and elemental attack of the build. So those are all the essential skills for the Elemental Greatsword build. Let's move on to the next section where we quickly go over the Krios crafting. Now, like I've said before in multiple videos, when it comes to Krios crafting, I try not to go for all the rarest skills possible on every piece of armor, although there may be one or two from time to time. Most of the time I try to get extra decoration slots or decoration slot upgrades, which allows for more customization with our builds. So with the Chaotic Helm, I've got a point in the Bloodbright skill. With the Chaotic Mail, again, I've got another point in the Bloodbright skill. These two could be considered kind of rare, but anyway, with the Chaotic Van Braces, I've got a point in the Blade Scale Hone skill, as well as a tier 1 decoration slot. As for the Chaotic Fouls, I've got a tier 4 decoration slot upgrade, and then for the Chaotic Greaves, I've got a point in Bloodlust. But every build out there, even endgame builds, they all come with various pros and cons. No build is absolutely perfect. When it comes to this Elemental Greatsword build, one of its biggest pros is its damage output. It still has decent raw attack combined with strong elemental attack, which means that we can take down monsters fairly quickly, especially if we are countering them with the correct element. On top of that, this build has decent survivability thanks to the Berserk skill, as well as Bloodbright and Stun Resistance. We're able to survive tough hunts in the game. And then finally for the pros is that this is an interchangeable elemental build, which means that we only really have to change the weapon and the appropriate elemental jewels, and we can make any element work with this build. But of course there are cons. One of the biggest cons is that this build will suffer unless a monster is highly susceptible to elements. And the other con is, of course, the health drain from Bloodlust and Berserk, which can potentially end up carting yourself if you're not careful. But if you're looking for a way to utilise the Surge / combo and you want to use elements with the Greatsword, while it's not traditionally the most optimal way to play the Greatsword, as raw attack still trumps the elemental damage of the Greatsword, this is nonetheless a fun way to use the weapon and that Surge / attack. Just remember to take into account a monster's elemental weakness and you'll find yourself using an unusual but enjoyable Greatsword build. But what are your thoughts? Please leave a comment down below, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you another endgame build, this time for the Greatsword in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.